Two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, off the cuff. One episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. It's maybe the best thing you can do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, and we have an amazing show tonight. I mean, this show has been like years in the making. You know, I've been trying to lead up with John MacLellan like two and a half years ago, I think it was, and then COVID hit, and you know what happened after that. But million shit. But anyway, John MacLellan is law enforcement. I don't know how to explain it. I guess he's gold, law enforcement gold. That's a good word to it because he was involved in the firefight with the terrorists, the Tsarnaev brothers, after the Boston Marathon in April of 2013. And when I talk about a firefight, not only was guns involved, there were bombs, there were pipe bombs. These guys, you know, when you talk about cops going above and beyond the line of duty, it was amazing. A little tiny police department like Watertown, you know, and politicians, let's defund the police, you know. Here's these guys, a little tiny 60-man police department. They have the balls of a fucking mountain lion, you know, and they take on these two terrorists and they face down bombs and a firefight like you wouldn't believe. And that's what we have in this country. Law enforcement that stands up, risks their life for people they don't know, and they put it all on the line. Well, you know, I'm getting carried away. I don't want to get that carried away with this. Before I go on, I want to introduce my co-host, straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD detective Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
Bill, I'm doing really good, and I am very excited tonight. And I know I say that most nights, but this is a tremendous panel of guests. Like you said, heroic. The word gold fit definitely. It's just, I can't wait to get into it and hear the stories.
You know, I was trying to think of the word law enforcement royalty. That's what I meant, but gold fits well. Anyway, let me introduce the guest. At the right next to me at the top is 8-time novelist, author, screenwriter Michele McPhee. Michele, it's so great to have. She wrote the book Mayhem that deals with the Boston Marathon bombing and the investigation and the prosecution. Unbelievable book. And if you haven't read it, you need to get that book because it tells the inside story. Welcome to the show, Michele.
It's so great to be on, and McPhee is just fine with cops. That's I think Sergeant MacLellan would agree. That's pretty much universal with law enforcement all over Massachusetts, New York, and now a little bit in LA. And I love. Listen, I cannot say enough about John. And it's funny because how I met Cliff is because he was in a diner in New York City. And you know, I thought it was a big shot because I'm living on Mulberry, right in front of the gun store on Main Street, you know, Mulberry and Grand. And there's this little diner there. Yeah, it was fantastic. And Cliff walked in with a Watertown sweatshirt, a Watertown PD sweatshirt. And he goes, no, I played the sergeant, the Watertown sergeant. And I go, yeah. I couldn't even believe it. I was like, this is before Patriots Day came out. So this was like a huge honor. Two of my favorite people now on one panel with two of the greatest detectives in the world. I mean, I feel like I'm with law enforcement royalty with a phenomenal actor and comedian thrown in.
Well, Michele, thank you so much. And I want to tell a quick story of how I met Cliff Moylan. 7 years ago, about maybe longer than that, 7 years ago, Cliff and I took a stand-up comedy class for 8 weeks together. And I had learned by taking the class with him, he was also an actor. And I stayed with stand-up for like 6 years. I stopped doing it once this podcast took off and COVID hit. So the podcast has taken much of my time up. But that's how I met Cliff. And then when I saw Cliff had one of the greatest lines that you could ever say in motion picture history. And at least for me, because in the terrorist attack, when he played Sergeant John MacLellan, and I don't know if this really happened, but Cliff said in the movie, and pardon my French, all of our subscribers, he said, "Welcome to Watertown, motherfucker." And I was like, wow, what a line to say. That is so great. Cliff Moylan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
It's great because, when I found out that you knew Sergeant MacLellan, that the connection was there, and I was just, it was just cemented the whole thing. Anyway, without further ado, I want to get into the story, and obviously we can't tell the whole story of the Boston Marathon bombing because it would take 8 or 10 hours. But one of the most amazing things about this is what I'm going to show. I'm going to show a little video of it right now, and it was the firefight that this hero in the bottom left got into. And I'm going to put this on the screen, and we'll watch a little bit of this. And he can, after it, he's going to tell us from his perspective, what the hell happened.
We need assistance immediately. Let's report a shots fired at officer. Shots fired at Watertown police officers.
My pistol ran out of ammo. I had to reload. He was still shooting. I reloaded. It turned out I emptied my pistol at him.
There's explosions and gunfire going on down the street.
These eyes, possible dynamite type explosives, and they're throwing it at the officers that are responding.
I thought we were going to die. I mean, I truly thought that we were going to die.
The first.
We're getting an update. There may be guns in the vehicle.
You say this was the street.
Sergeant John MacLellan closes in with another Watertown officer, Joey Reynolds, just ahead of him.
I come around the corner and the bad guy's out, arms fully stretched out.
Report a shots fired at officers trying to stop the vehicle.
Shooting at the windshield of Officer Reynolds' cruiser.
Shots fired at Watertown police officers.
The bad guy switches from Joey to me and takes one shot and puts it right through the middle of my windshield from about 120 feet away.
We need assistance immediately. Shots fired again. There's shots fired again. We have 3 units responding.
So I stood here. I said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I jumped up, threw it in drive, and I just jumped down right here, and I was following it. I was the
car's moving.
Car's moving, and I'm following it like this and just shooting right in between here using the door as cover. So I probably took 12, 15 steps with the vehicle and saw the tree. I shut the door. I ran to the tree, and they think someone's in it the whole time. So you could see them shooting at it. You can see them throwing the bombs at it. And I'm like, geez, this is working. I'm like, I can't believe it.
We get a report from the patrol supervisor that these suspects has possible dynamite type explosives with them, and they're throwing it at the officers that are responding.
Now a third Watertown officer, Sergeant Jeff Pugliese, responds.
And I fired 3 or 4 shots. I was positive I was hitting him, but he wasn't going down.
In more than 3 decades on the force, neither man had ever fired his weapon in action until this night.
Who did you hit?
Tamerlan.
Did he keep shooting?
He came charging up the street, shooting at me. So we're about 6 feet apart when he ran up that driveway.
You're shooting each other?
Yes.
6, 7 feet apart?
Yeah. I emptied my pistol at him. And in the meantime, his pistol ran out of ammunition. I didn't know if it jammed at the time or what. And he kind of looked at his gun, looked at me, got frustrated, threw the gun, hit me in my left bicep. And he turned, he ran down back onto the street, took a left. I chased after him, and I probably left about 4 or 5 feet in the air and came down on the shoulders and tackled him.
We had 8 bullets in him, and he was still fighting us. The only I had was my empty gun, and I pistol whipped him. I was trying to knock him out. I hit him as hard as I could, 10, 12 times. Couldn't knock him out.
The younger Tsarnaev, now back in the Mercedes, runs over his brother, just missing Pugliese.
And I'm laying there, and I saw the front wheels go over Tamerlan. I saw him bounce up and underneath the undercarriage a couple of times. I saw him get hung up in the rear wheels and get dragged 20, 25 feet.
All officers responded. We have 1 body pinned down, and we have another one on the run, shots fired.
And all we saw was taillights at that point.
Police fired as he fled, They missed him, but a ricochet wounded a transit police officer who had responded to the scene.
Once other agencies started showing up, they said to us, "Do you know who you have here?" And we said, "A couple of guys that hijacked a car."
And he goes, no. Do you know who you got? These are the Boston Marathon bombers. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how do you know that? He's like, we've been chasing them all night. These are them. These are the guys. I'm like,
so is this black hat or is this white hat? Who's the dead guy? I mean, is this bigger than...
You know, John, I feel like I got to do this. Amazing, man. I feel like if there was a crowd that watched this, they should give you a standing ovation. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. John, I'm so much want to hear your perspective. When you watch this, first of all, before we get into it, how does it make you feel?
It's funny, Bill. I don't think I saw that since it aired years ago. And geez, it is kind of surreal. You know, it's funny. It's you know, it's just part of my life, and I don't look at it like that. It was just like kind of a night on the job, just like you guys. You know, just so happened who they were and how it shook out, how long the gunfight was, and how, you know, they had pipe bombs with them that thank God they didn't make it down to New York City with, because it was, I mean,
you know, John, can I just set the stage, and I'm going to give you the whole screen, and I want you to tell the story. Prior to this, they killed a police officer from MIT. Is that correct? They executed him, actually, and the point was that they were trying to steal his firearm, and they weren't able to get his firearm, but they executed this 27-year-old officer, Sean Collier, right? And then after that, they carjacked a Mercedes of a young Asian man, and they showed up in Watertown with the Honda belonging to Dzokar Tsarnaev and the carjacked Mercedes. I set the scene now. You got the whole screen, buddy.
Okay, so you know, that night was a very crazy night, because I was woken up by my wife, told that there was a police officer shot in Cambridge. We didn't know what the details were, but this was Sean Collier, who was assassinated by these two cowards. They assassinated him trying to get his weapon. He had a triple retention holster. So they got in there, they shot him 3 or 4 times, and his gun belt was up under his armpits, because they were trying to work that gun up and they couldn't get it out. So thank God, even in death, he was a hero, because every bullet they had with his gun, that would have been another bullet that they could have sent down our way. And you know, a lot of Watertown police officers, a lot of police officers from all over the area were very lucky that night. I don't think it could happen ever again and not have one of us get shot or one of the bombs kill us. You know, so we were very lucky. They came into Watertown. We were told by dispatch right away. They were following. They would the Chinese gentleman that was carjacked knew his number to his vehicle, and they tracked his number. He gave the number right to the police officers, and they were able to track the vehicle, and they were giving it to us in real time. So he was another hero. Got us there very quickly. And as I turned around the corner, Joe Reynolds made the best tactical move of his lifetime. Instead of engaging these guys, he put it in reverse, got underneath that engine compartment, and put it in reverse, and came right back past me with all the bullet holes in the front of his car and in the windshield. I couldn't believe he wasn't hit, but he wasn't. He got out. He joined the gunfight with me. It was me and him for about the first 3 minutes. They threw 4 or 5 pipe bombs at us. The vehicle took a lot of it. The vehicle took a lot of the pipe bombs landed on the other side of the vehicle, the first 3, and took a lot of the percussion away from us. It was a long gunfight, and then we had other police officers coming to help us. And we were very lucky. We were very lucky to have the help that we got that night. We were a very small department. We only had 4 officers on that night. So to call for help, and to have people, we had SWAT guys in our department in our town and within 15 minutes because they were pulling posts in Boston at the marathon bombing. They were still FBI agents, Boston cops, Boston SWAT guys. They were all still pulling posts in Boston. They came right out. They were 10 minutes away. So we were, we did a good job. My guys did a great job, but I have to thank every single police officer that showed up that night. They were the true unsung heroes. All the medals I got and everything, all the medals we got in Watertown, that's all for them. They all
John, can you go into a bar within 100 miles of Boston and have to pay for a drink?
I would certainly hope not. And if you ever do, you call me up and I'll give you my credit card. I'm paying for your drink.
That's right. Cliff Moylan. How did it make you feel to play a part of a man like this?
It's hard to sum up in a sentence or two. I mean, I don't know. You kind of put me on the spot. Humans as a species need purpose. Without purpose, we get depressed, we get aimless. And John's purpose that day was to defend Watertown, Boston, and the United States of America. And that gave me purpose in portraying him. And I could not be prouder. I mean, we have a bond that will last as long as both of us are alive. I love him like family. And there was a decision he made when he ran out of bullets that I thought was the most admirable thing I've ever heard in my entire life. He was stuck behind a tree with no bullets, and he probably had a conversation with himself saying, am I going to die behind this tree with no bullets? Or am I going to take this empty gun and do my very best to bang the shit out of Tamerlan Tsarnaev? And he ran, 30 or 40 feet with an empty gun and just clocked him with it. And, that provided an entire nation of safety. And I applaud you.
Something, one of the things that many people that don't know about the Boston Marathon bombing is that the Tsarnaev brothers' intention was to come to Manhattan, to come to Times Square. Had they not engaged with Watertown, they would have killed hundreds of people probably in Times Square in New York. And these guys saved that from happening.
Cliff, you made a point just now. You brought something that John didn't reveal, that he ran out of bullets. And I was thinking that when John, when you were saying that the gunfight lasted for at least 3 minutes before anybody else came, it was between you and Reynolds. And I'm saying, I know, in New York, we would carry a full magazine in the Glock is like 13 and 1 is 14. And then 2 backup clips is normal. And maybe a second gun most times. When I was in uniform, I would always carried a second gun. Even when I was a detective, if we were going out for somebody bad, I always had a backup gun. But that was going through my mind that you were running out. It sounded like they had plenty of ammunition and hurling bombs at you. And just by the way, that tactical move of walking with the car and then
that was brilliant. That was brilliant.
That was unbelievable because bullets aren't usually, unless it's a small tree, they're not passing through the tree. And then it made a distraction where they started to fire on the car, let them waste some ammunition on that. And then did they actually throw bombs at the moving car, John?
Yeah, they did. The first 2, the percussion was taken by the expedition. So lucky. And another one of them out of the 5, when they threw it, it rolled on the wick and put itself out. So it never went out, never went off. So, I mean, just the unbelievable luckiness that we had, along with shit luck too. But we, that night we were very lucky. Some stuff happened that still makes me shake my head, saying, I know my dad was moving me around like a chess piece from heaven. He was, you don't want to be there, brother. You move over here. You don't want to be here. I'll never. There's no way anyone can ever say anything other than that to me. I was being moved around by the hand of God.
That's amazing.
Had a guardian angel that
Michele McPhee, this is your book, Mayhem. And I want to thank you for sending me and Phil Grimaldi and Cliff Moylan a copy of that. I got through like 99% of it. I didn't read like the very last chapter, but it's quite an amazing book. You track the whole investigation. you probably are the expert on the Boston Marathon bombing. If there is an expert in this world, it's got to be you. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, first thing I want to say is the Watertown that night, and Cliff, I love that you brought up the fact that he was out of bullets, ran, and people forget Tamerlan was a maniac. He was 6'4", all muscle. He was a Golden Gloves champ twice in the heavyweight division. He was an MMA fighter. This kid was an animal. In fact, when they finally got him in, he was still alive. Puglisi shot him 9 times. John beat the hell out of him with a pistol, whipped him. The guy is like, he gets run over and scalped by his own brother, who dragged him at least 30 feet. I mean, one of the amazing things, John, I don't know if you remember, is that somebody took the blood stain of Tamerlan being dragged down Dexter and turned it into an American flag with chalk. So they wrote USA at that blood stain at the spot where he died.
I love that. I love that.
Oh, it was beautiful. It said USA, and then that night was absolute havoc. But I love that you said you had to be moved around by the hand of God, because it truly is a miracle. Tamerlan was coming straight at you. The people described it to me as he had clearly been trained in a military style, because he just walked straight into the path of gunfire like somebody who knew what he was doing. These bombs now these weren't just pipe bombs. 2 of them were pressure cooker bombs that were almost identical. One was smaller, one was the same size as the ones that were detonated that caused that kind of carnage. And these bombs are thrown at these police officers. It is extraordinary. No one was killed. John is 1,000% right. But the bombs were so powerful. I remember one of them was embedded in the side of a Toyota Camry that was parked on the street, like completely took out the door. Another piece of bomb flew into a little kid's hockey net. The cruiser that John mentioned took a big, huge chunk of this explosion. It truly was look, we've written about a lot, or I have written about a lot of heroic actions in New York, the NYPD. I could tell you a million stories just as brave. I'm sure Phil and Bill, I know you guys have been at scenes that are just as chaotic. We were all there on 9/11. But there is something to be said, just to go back, Bill, to how you opened the show. There is something to be said about law enforcement, and this is the true story. It doesn't matter what the narrative across the country is now. Anyone who's been around cops, as much as we all have, know that this is the norm. This is extraordinary work. And Watertown we're superheroes that night, truly. But this is, guys like John are out there every single solitary day doing work. And his tactics were extraordinary, but I agree with him. I think that there's something about how there was almost a spiritual element at work that night.
Michelle, 100%. And when I saw John thinking, while he was obviously scared about the tactics, using the car to put it in drive and go along and shoot with them, I mean, that's brilliant. And that's something you would expect from a guy maybe that was in a bunch of shootings. This was his first shooting, and he was obviously trained very well. I think at the time, John, you probably had 22, 23 years on the job at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
And you finished, you retired when you had almost 30, right?
30. Yeah, I did 30
Wow.
and retired in May of last year. Yep.
That's amazing. And something, you go through a career, and up until that point, you had never been in a shooting, and you were brilliant. You and that other sergeant, was it Reynolds?
No, Reynolds was the officer that was with John.
Oh, Parisi, was that his name? Puglisi. Brilliant. That guy was tough as shit, man. He goes after that guy without even thinking twice. Had no more rounds. He tackles the guy, and the guy shot 9 times. He's still fighting. I mean,
if I can add to that, if I can add to that, which
sure.
It has to be said, I took the keys from him. That officer, he was 61 years old at the time, 60 years old at the time. He had worked from 7 a.m. to 3 o'clock on a detail, and then 3 o'clock to midnight on his shift. He was in his minivan, sitting out in the parking lot, smoking a cigar, going home because he had another detail the next morning. He heard us getting out with this car, thought it was just a carjack vehicle. And he said, you know what? There's only 3 cars out in the street. I'm going to head that way just in case you know, I can pull up on them on the minivan and we can lock these kids up and I can help these guys out. That's not a guy collecting a check.
That's a real cop. Yeah.
Was he actually off duty, John?
Off duty.
Yeah.
That's
Off
amazing.
duty.
That's amazing.
He has a funny story about Sergeant Puglisi too. So remember, thank God Dick Donahue's alive, but we had a cop that he bled completely out of all of his own blood. And it was only cops that donated blood that saved his life. But I think, John, you probably have a better recollection of this, but he's holding Tamlin. He almost just got run over, you know, and he was holding him. And now he's got this guy who was scalped and he's still bleeding out. And the ambulance that he thought was coming for Tamlin goes right by him to go pick up Dick Donahue. So he's alone with this still struggling perp, still Tamlin's and I have. And he told me this funny story that his wife called and he was like, I can't talk right now. I just shot someone.
You know, I've been in situations like that. Like, why do you answer the phone? You know what I mean? But you're like, why did I answer this damn phone? I have to answer to my wife. I'm in a shooting, you know?
Maybe he wanted to let her know that he was okay, because that sounds like it was a few minutes in. Maybe she heard something. And John, I just got to ask you this. I was in 2 active shootings myself early in my career. Right after I came out of the police academy was one, and the second one was a few years later. For me, I felt like instincts just immediately kicked in, the training, and I think just common sense sort of kicked in. Is that what happened for you when that whole firefight went down? Did you just go into autopilot?
I feel that. I mean, people ask me, why did you do this? How did you do that? Why did you do this? And to me, there was no other way to do it. So to me, it's got to be the training. They were unbelievable. You know, Massachusetts has very good training for police officers. We do a lot of training and stuff like that. But again, training was a lot to do with it. But I mean, I did stuff that I don't know why I did it. So to me, again, it really, really came from somewhere else. You know, I mean, it didn't.
It was divine.
I know that.
Divine intervention, right?
Yeah.
I think for me, I think survival instinct kicks in, and then your training kicks in, and just your, you know, the knowledge of everyday life, street knowledge or whatever. That's the way I felt, and it all happened so quick that it kind of seems like it goes slowing away too. You know what I mean, John?
Yeah.
Like everything slows down, and the onset, like for me, it slowed down for a second, and then you just did things without even thinking, you know?
Yeah.
Can I say something for the viewers that are watching this that might not be familiar with Watertown?
Sure.
This is not Detroit. When a police officer suits up that day, they're not thinking of getting in a gunfight.
Yeah, that's for
It
sure.
is a very sleepy, low crime area. So for you to adjust from ho hum, here's another night on the job, to okay,
gunfight. Yeah.
I need to pull out my gun. I mean, I applaud you for that too. I mean, it must have been pretty shocking to walk into that. You thought you were pulling over a carjacker, which alone in Watertown is a big deal.
Yeah, you're right. And again, but it's not anything that any police officer in any town, whether it's a huge town or a small town, you know, that's what they're facing every day. You know, they're facing that, and you just gotta, you know, I just hope that, you know, I pray that they make the right decisions. You know, I hope that everybody makes the right decisions, because it's right now it's hard. I mean, I feel bad for anyone who's been in a shooting, and they must be shaking in their boots. Are they going to relook into this? And I'm afraid that they're going to come back at me and say, "Hey, you did something wrong. We're all you lost." You know, I'm like, that's not going to happen, John. I'm like,
I doubt that.
I don't think that's going to happen. You know, folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like this channel, we give you stuff from a police perspective. Go on our YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumbs up. If you want to support us on Patreon, we have a Patreon where you can become a member. We also have a YouTube membership. We have 5 levels. You can be the bucket. You can be coffee with cannon. You can polish my rack. You can be dipped in butter, or you could be heated dipped in butter. They're all different levels of being members. In essence, heated dipped in butter costs $49.99 a month, but that's another story because you got heated butter you dipped in. So it's a funny story. But anyway, folks, we're bringing you these real stories of real cops and from a police point of view. And as I said earlier on the show, I was trying to get John MacLellan like 2.5 years ago. That was when we were doing it in the studio. And my buddy Cliff Moylan here, who also happens to be a native Bostonian. I think that's probably redundant. If you say you're a Bostonian, you don't need to put the word native in front of it. But Cliff is a Bostonian, and you can see he's Irish as St. Paddy's Day. And Cliff, I always wanted to ask you that Lower Mills. I always wanted to ask you, Cliff. I always wanted to ask you. You know, when our city was attacked on 9/11, we obviously took that personal as New Yorkers. How did you feel as a Boston native when these guys attacked the Boston Marathon with these bombs?
I'm going to try to say this with a sense of humility, but on the one hand, it's an absolute tragedy. My father was 2 blocks away from where the bombs went off. But on the other hand, I knew that, Boston people have a way of policing themselves. The Tsarnaev brothers are kind of lucky that the cops got to them first. It's the wrong city to fuck with. I say that with humility, but I say that with certainty.
I like that.
It pulled my heartstrings.
I would agree.
I was, on the edge of my seat watching, wanted to know every little detail while they were looking for the Boston Marathon bombers. But it's Boston, dude. There's some neighborhoods you don't even want to litter in.
Yeah.
They'll get you.
There's pride. There's pride in being a Bostonian. There's pride in your city. And
it's Bostonian.
Bostonian. I'm a New Yorker. I don't know that shit. But no,
Billy,
but
listen, I want to give a little background because we're talking about the shooting when they were captured. But there's people on the channel in other countries that may not know. Just a quick kind of a rundown on April 15, 2013, at about 2:49 p.m., right at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. There were 2 bombs set off about 14 seconds apart, 2 pressure cooker bombs that killed 3 people, injured 265 people, and 17 of those injuries, people lost limbs. So it was a horrific scene. The manhunt went from the 15th until the shooting happened on the 18th. And then I believe on the 19th is when the second brother was captured. The shooting that we talked about with John was on the 18th late in the evening, and he was captured. The second brother, Dzokar, was captured hiding in a boat, a covered up boat that was in someone's alleyway, I guess. That was later on the 19th. So just for people who don't know about the Boston Marathon bombing, that's just a little insight into what took place. There was a joint FBI, ATF, Drug Enforcement Administration, Central Intelligence Agency, and the National Counterterrorism Center all joined, as well as the local law enforcement. And I really believe that the Boston Police Department really took the lead on it. So there was a lot of law enforcement in the manhunt to try and capture these guys and bring them to justice. The police and law enforcement, obviously, the heroics of John here today are on display, and you know what he did and what the other officers that were with him did. But I'm sure there was a lot of investigating done by all of those agencies, and they were the brother was successfully tried in court, and he was given the death sentence. I believe now the death sentence has been placed aside until another jury hears the case, but he was found guilty on, I believe, about 30 counts or something to that effect. So that's
I just wanted to mention one thing, Michelle, about the investigation. And I was watching a video very recently, and they had the pictures of them, the Tsarnaev brothers, placing these pressure cooker bombs at 2 different locations. And the FBI made a decision not to put it out there. For what reason? I mean, I didn't. When I saw that, I totally disagreed with that decision. And they actually had Eric Holder and ran it by him. What does he know about fighting crime, Eric Holder? He was the attorney general, but that I wouldn't have a guy like him making the decision. But you got a picture of the bombers, and by not putting their picture out there, guess who you're endangering? John MacLellan and other police agencies that don't know these are the guys. These are the terrorists. So whoever was making that stupid FBI decision, and I'm sorry to trounce the FBI, but I think that was a dumb decision. Get the damn picture out there. We think these are the perps that did the bombing.
Well, what I'll say to that, Bill, is that, there were a lot of good FBI agents out there that slept in their cars and drove in from all over the country and, did the job. But there were police officers who said if the FBI had been cooperative with the information, and obviously there's a long history of no love lost between the FBI and local law enforcement. It goes back to Whitey Bulger and Mark Rossetti and other cases where the local law enforcement felt like they were usurped or undermined or sometimes thwarted entirely by actions of some of the FBI agents. In this particular case, Ed Davis spoke about it on my podcast and said that those photos were in hand on Tuesday and that the decision was made at the highest levels of Department of Justice to not release them. And he snapped and said, I want to know who made that decision, because if somebody gets hurt, then I'm going to go public with that. And as we all know, there are a lot of cops. And I think that the people who helped me in this investigation, this continuing 9-year investigation, were really angry at the loss of Sean Collier. And they asked themselves, if those photos had gone out, would Sean Collier be alive today? And I think it's a very valid question. If you recall, the night in the hours before John almost got killed, along with his colleagues in Watertown, there were FBI agents who were pulled over by Cambridge police officers who refused to identify themselves and refused to cooperate. There was a lot of activity around that prompted, a congressional inquiry, and the FBI didn't show up for it. So I don't know if we'll ever get to the answer of those
Michele,
questions.
I got to stop you there. Are you saying that there were FBI agents on the hunt in Cambridge, and that when they were pulled over by police officers, they refused to identify themselves or tell what they were doing there?
So the FBI officially released the photos and the video of suspect black hat and suspect white hat at 5:20 p.m. in Copley Square Hotel in Boston. And within minutes, 911 calls started coming into the Cambridge PD saying that there were suspicious vehicles idling around the area of MIT, of Inman Square, where the brothers lived. And there was a sergeant named Rob Lowe who pulled over one of these vehicles. Like, what are you doing here? We got some complaints. We need to figure out, why are you idling outside this location? And the FBI agent rolled down his rear window, flashed his badge, and said, screw. So Sergeant Lowe went back to the cruiser, dispatched this encounter, and the guy took off. And this sort of interaction with the FBI, and I'm sure, John, you've heard about this from your colleagues, some of the Cambridge guys, those interactions happened several times where the FBI refused to cooperate with the Cambridge PD. At one point, it turned into a car chase. There was at 10:20, somebody actually dispatched out loud, these motherfuckers are here and someone's going to get hurt. And we know what happened about 10 minutes later. So that prompted a congressional investigation. There were people in the MIT Police Department and the Cambridge Police Department who went to Chuck Grassley, the senator, and to Congressman Bill Keating, a former prosecutor from Massachusetts. And Keating, a Democrat, and Grassley, a Republican, had bipartisan fury for the FBI and started holding hearings, but the FBI didn't show up. They still haven't shown up.
I think that was supposed to be corrected after 9/11, that information was supposed to be shared between law enforcement. And when it's not, you're losing all of these other eyes and ears on the ground that potentially could capture these guys. And the other thing is that you're endangering law enforcement, because now they don't know who these guys are. And these guys were known days before the information was released. And as you said, Sean Collier may not have been killed if that information was released, because these guys were from the neighborhood. They were right from around here.
Listen, they had parking tickets in Watertown. So Johar was well known to that little area. So I think you know, at the very least, those photos should have been shared with BPD, Watertown BTD, Cambridge PD. Because look, they had an open investigation into the brothers. So somebody had to take a look at suspect Black Hat and say, hey, that's the dude I interviewed, you know, a half a dozen times at his house. And that somebody should have been the case agent that was assigned to interview him. And it's a matter of public record that the Tsarnaev family was interviewed several times before this atrocity took place. So I have a hard time believing. And I mean, you know, Phil and Bill, you guys are detectives. I'm a reporter. You know, even a guy who heckled you at a club, Cliff, you might remember them a year later if they blew up the marathon. So right there, I think that people were very suspicious about this entire narrative that they didn't know who the brothers were.
You know, the thing that bothers me about that is this. Now, FBI agents are not going to be familiar with the area unless they sent an actual case agent that knew one of the Tsarnaev brothers. But it sounds like they were from maybe a different area, not local. And you'll want to get a hold of some local officer to see, do you know these guys? I mean, if these guys are traveling to a gym and going boxing or whatever they're doing, who's going to know better than a local cop? You know, they might know the haunts or where they hang out, or they might know something about a vehicle they're driving that maybe is not registered them, or so many different things. So anytime that I did an investigation, I went out of my jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, I always wanted to touch base with the local police. Number one, to let them know we were there in case the shit hit the fan, that they would know law enforcement from another agency or another jurisdiction is there. And number two, to give us a heads up on, you know, information about the building we're going to go to or who we're looking for, different things like that. Now, there are times when it's a sensitive case and, you know, it could be maybe organized crime or something like that, where you want to keep things very close to the vest because you're afraid that the people you're looking for might get a heads up from someone in a local jurisdiction. I get that. Don't get me wrong. But in this particular case, this was an all out, you know, they killed all those people. They blew up the marathon, and they really should have touched base with the local police. I can't believe that they did that, if that's true.
What you're seeing on the screen and the boxer, that's Tamerlan Tsarnaev, just to get an idea how big he is.
With no real job, he dealt drugs for cash. Self-pity and frustrations mounted. Jahar's life, on the other hand, appeared blessed, or so it seemed.
People would say he's charming. He was a social psychologist. He said, but no one seemed to have ever had a conversation with him of any depth or length. And this is like a character that a lot of immigrants will recognize. A kid who finds his role, and his role is to mirror back at you exactly what you want.
It's at around this time, the year before the bombings, that Tamerlan returns to Dagestan. Islam seemed a response to his stagnant life, and he soon sought out those with extreme yearnings. Listen to this conversation recorded in Dagestan. It's Tamerlan considering the pros and cons of jihad.
Может, ты можешь удерживать это. А вот я пока не могу, вот мне вот вообще гневно внутри начинаю вот эти.
There is a rage of hatred inside me, he says. Some believe Tamerlan became radicalized on that trip. Others doubt that, but it's clear he was interested.
But it was like great. But Bill, here's the question: who recorded that? Tamerlan. He was visiting his relatives and wearing a wire. So that raises a big eyebrow, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I would say so.
And also,
and
Michelle,
that guy got locked up right after Tamerlan left. And you know what else happened during Tamerlan's trip to Russia? All of his buddies got tracked and killed by the Russian military. You know, I had some help from a very interesting intelligence expert recently who tried to school me a little bit on how this might have worked. And he said it's very likely that the operation that took out Tamerlan's friends was carried out by the GRZ with the help of the CIA.
So what you were trying to say, that he was an informant for somebody?
Well, Bill, I don't know. When I go home for Christmas, and I'm not going to be wired up. This Tamerlan was on 2 terror watch lists because remember the Russians warned us that he was running around with jihadists. They said he was in contact with people, including relatives, who were mujahideen, who wanted to kill us. And Tamerlan was put on 2 terror watch lists in 2012, which is right after he murdered 3 people we suspect in this still unsolved triple murder in Waltham. So Tamerlan's a prime suspect with, a source of mine called me that day and said, it looks like an Al-Qaeda training video in here. You have 3 guys, one of whom was Tamerlan's self-described American best friend, who were nearly decapitated. The 2 Jewish victims were sexually mutilated. There's still drugs and money. It looks like a robbery. And Tamerlan has emerged as the prime suspect in that case with another Chechen guy. But that Chechen guy, well, he was being interviewed by an FBI agent and a couple of cops, and he flipped out on the FBI agent in a violent way. He too was a very dangerous MMA fighter, and he was shot dead during this interview at his Orlando apartment by an FBI agent. But when you look into the history of the FBI agent, the guy was a disgraced Oakland, California police officer collecting a full disability who somehow gets hired by the Boston FBI field office, which is, I would argue, somewhat questionable.
Yeah, I mean, I read that in your book. I was just going to ask you about that triple murder that he was a number 1 suspect in. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just so scary to think about.
I just want to put something
But the good news, yeah, go for it, Bill.
I want to put something out there. When FBI has a confidential informant that's involved in, and not only the FBI, a lot of federal agencies. I'll talk about a case that I had where I had a confidential informant. I don't want to name the agency that he was working with, but he was heavily involved in 7 different cases, and he was shot and killed. And I had the case, and they were allowing this individual to deal narcotics at a high, like ounces of cocaine. And he was doing it with the knowledge of this federal agency. And, he was doing it out in the open. They knew about it, but he was involved in 7 cases. I don't want to say too much about them, but they were of a much higher standard than dealing cocaine. That's all I'll say about it. But so my point is this: they will allow certain things to go on when the greater good is a much bigger case. I had a U.S. attorney call me on that case and say, "You got to find the guys that killed this person." We had him on several different major cases, and it wasn't narcotics. And it turned out the way we found the body, there was a rat next to the body. The person was handcuffed, and it seemed like he was killed because he was an informant. It turned out it wasn't. It was something totally not to do with it. But my point is, they will actually knowingly allow a confidential informant that's working for them at a high level be involved in criminal activity. Absolutely.
Schmitty, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. I'm going to read what you wrote because I think it's directed towards mostly John MacLellan here. Nothing contributes so much to tranquilize the mind as a steady purpose. To all that seek justice and truth, thank you for the following your instinct. Thank you for your bravery. Love you all. Thank you very much, Schmitty. That was very kind of you.
That's a nice line. That's a great line.
And, I mean, this... John MacLellan, I mean, as I said, I'm so honored to meet you. And, like people would want to know, obviously, what are you doing now? But you had a 30-year police career. This incident, you probably wake up every day or go to bed every night and think about it. It's got to be in your mind. That's we all say that you do 20 or more years in law enforcement, even less than that. We all have a touch of PTSD. And I have it myself, and I never went through an incident like that. Well, most people haven't, but I'm sure you must think about it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you get reminded of it a lot. A lot of people, I tend to forget about it, and then it gets brought up a lot. We live in a small town, and I'm still doing details because in Massachusetts, when you retire, you're still able to do details till you're 65. So I'm still in the uniform once in a while, getting out there, directing traffic, keeping my arms moving.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, though, I'm doing a lot of I'm a big bead squeezer. I love church. I'm in church a lot.
I never heard that expression, bead squeezer. That's a good one. I'm gonna have to use that one.
I'm stealing that one. I'm stealing
a bead squeezer.
It's not mine. You can have it. But
we use Holy Roller. We use Holy Roller.
Holy Roller.
But I'm having a lot of fun. I really am. Reconnecting with the wife. I worked at night 30 years a night, so I feel like we're really having our getting to really know each other now.
John, when you retired from the police department and you worked like crazy hours, my last 10 years I was in homicide, so I worked at minimum of 400 to 500 hours overtime every year, and I worked that crazy 4 and 2 schedule. So it was like you didn't know when you did go home if you could get along with these people.
Yeah.
you didn't see them that much,
It's true.
Yeah.
But I'm lucky. I have a great partner, and I'm blessed. I'm very blessed.
Yeah, I can see why you're a bead squeezer. Cliff, are you involved in the bead squeezing too, or no?
No. My finger's a little rusty. But you know what's funny? John MacLellan said he's a bead squeezer. He's religious. The Tsarnaev brothers were also religious. And it's funny how religion could be used for good or bad, like a hammer, it could build a house or it could tear a house down. Thank you for using your religion.
Cliff, you're so right.
Reasons.
Yeah, all through history, we see more people who have died in the name of the Lord than any other thing. It's true. It's true. Look, I don't want to beat down on religion because John,
I'm a sucker for
John may send the Archdiocese of Boston after me. I have cardinals chasing me in their Cadillacs.
Never.
Hey, John, do you guys, you would generally work a solo car, or you said you had a partner, but did you guys work in two-man car or a solo car?
Yeah, we don't have any two-man cars in our town. I just happened to say my partner because he was with me that night in another vehicle. But no, all single officer vehicles. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but I guess if you go to a job, you guys hook up and handle it together. So
correct. Yeah.
I get it.
They send usually 2 cars to each call, and then there's a supervisor that goes to calls to different priorities. You have you go to that call if you need it or whatnot.
I think most police departments around the country are like that, unless you're in a big city where, like New York, there was some solo assignments too when you're in uniform, but for the most part, it's 2-man cars.
Cliff or Michelle, you can answer this question. How is this incident? But you can both answer it. How has this incident changed Boston, or has it?
Cliff? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cliff.
No.
He said first. Ladies first.
All right, Michelle, you first.
For me, I'm always going to just, Cliff talks about how Boston is different, and you can see it from the response. You had like a New England Patriot carrying, it's funny. There were so many people who didn't want to run away from those bombings when they went off. When those blasts, devastated Boylston Street, that was the response. People launched into action. They were pulling their belts off and creating tourniquets. They were cutting the straps off their purses to tie them around people's severed limbs. And, it really makes you proud to be a Bostonian. But I think the thing that always brings me to tears, even when I recall it, is after that insane firefight with the Watertown PD and John MacLellan coming up with that incredible maneuver, and his colleagues taking fire and bombs and just absolute insanity. Everybody's lucky to be alive. But that feeling of standing in Watertown as all of the Bearcats and the tanks started to pull out and all the different departments, and people took to the streets. And Phil and Bill, you'll remember, it's almost like after 9/11 when you were so proud to be an American. But most importantly for Bostonians, we love our city. And I can remember crying. It was a sense of relief that the bomber had been captured. I was glad the older brother was dead. I almost wished, I hate to say it, and this is, there's a part of me that wishes that Dzokar had stayed in that boat just a little bit longer. And it would have saved a lot of people the agony of, this ongoing Supreme Court battle right now about the death penalty. Because this is going to go on for at least a decade. It's going to cost tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer monies. This kid is suing us right now. So he's sitting around a jail cell suing us. He's collecting a stimulus check during COVID.
That's unbelievable.
That is disgusting.
So in a way, I just wish there could have been a happier ending if he had just, if we had just left him on that boat for another hour or so.
You think he would have bled out? Is what you're saying?
I mean, he had been shot multiple times. He was bleeding profusely. When he was staggering on the side of the boat, I mean, it was wild. Billy Evans, who admits he grabbed a Watertown cop, like, take me to this house. When, David Henenberry, who is the owner of, God rest his soul, of that boat, when he called 911, just think about it. This guy, and that's why when I guffawed a little bit, because there was so many news stories in the Globe and Rolling Stone, and there was so many stories like the poor brother, the floppy-haired teen who followed Tamerlan down the street. And all of these people were trying to make Johar look like he was this hapless victim of his intimidating older brother. But the truth was very apparent when you saw what he wrote on that boat. As he's bleeding out, he's writing this anti-American manifesto. Know that you are dealing with men, jihadi, who look down the barrel of your gun and see heaven. So this was a guy who believed in the jihad, who believed in punishing America. He wrote it on the side of the boat. In fact, he carved it into the wood on the boat and then used a fire extinguisher to make sure that people saw the big bleep you. And the day that he was arraigned, he literally stood up in his holding cell and flipped the bird into the camera. This is an unrepentant, dangerous little savage that is continually being painted as a victim, and it drives me out of my mind. And so when I say that, I know it sounds cold-hearted, but it would have saved us literally. The costs of his trials, the first two trials, are so exorbitant, they're under seal. The cost of his ongoing appeal, for which there are attorneys from all over the country who fly to Colorado and fly all over the place on us to defend this kid, it's under seal. That's how expensive it is. They're never going to tell us how much this is all costing us. I just think that it would have been, for the victims who have to face this kid every single time he's in the news and think about how much of their own money is being spent to defend him, I think it would have been better off if he had just bled out in that boat.
Yeah, no, hey, we have no sympathy for that guy. Cliff Moylan, if you can remember the question.
How did this change Boston? How did this affect Boston?
Yes, yeah.
I think it affected Boston, and Boston collectively turned a minus into a plus, which has been the pattern of people from Boston to do. People who grew up in Boston earn the right to say they're from Boston because it's a tough place. And all of the things that have happened, historically in Boston, it's added to the character, and that city has collectively persevered. Sergeant John MacLellan and the Watertown PD make me proud to be from Boston. They make me proud to be American also. And there's an expression that I'm fond of, and it is this: you go through stuff and you grow through stuff. Though it was an unpleasant thing, we all came out better for it because we made ourselves better for it. And I don't love that this happened, but I love how we handled it. And
well said.
Something, Cliff, you're so right, because I think that John MacLellan probably thinks that was horrible, but you know something? I lived through it. Now I'm glad it happened because I did live through it, because it changed me as a man and showed me who I am as a man. I'm sure you knew you were a man before that, but it changes your life. And I heard that even Bill Belichick uses that technique with the car now for his running backs. They drive the car right through the line, and they hide behind. It took you guys a while to get the joke. It was like you were on tape delay there. I was like, please laugh.
No,
when you go to other parts of the country and you meet somebody from Boston, they're ready to tell everybody in the room, I'm from Boston. Dorchester, Lowell Mills, St. Greg's Parish. I'm from Boston. And it's because of this. because of things like this. And I mean, I don't want to whip out a history book, but Boston, the city's been through some shit.
Yeah.
No.
My mother told me to watch my mouth tonight. Sorry.
You're doing okay.
Doing a great job.
You know,
Yeah.
I just want, before I forget to do this, I just want to go to a quick commercial.
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. Joe
You know,
Murray's
John-
a good friend of the show.
John, I just wanted to say that, what you guys did in Watertown is so amazing, but yet it's not unique. And I mean that by saying that small town police all over this nation put their lives at risk for strangers every single day. I mean, you guys went above and beyond what almost any cop in the history of this nation has done. But my whole point of that is that, and then you get this whole defund the police movement, and you see I know, look, people say, "Oh, don't get political." There's no such thing as not getting political when you're talking about the police. Police and politics go hand in hand because we are victims of politics and we're victims of poor decisions by politicians. But having said all of that, knowing that, you guys went into that, balls to the wall. And, it makes everyone that wears a uniform proud.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, again, and I'll say it to the day I die. I mean, I think a lot of police officers would be very happy to be put in my shoes that night. I feel that my guys did a great job being a supervisor. I had some young kids out there, and they did unbelievable work. And to none of us to get hurt and not to have to call any of their wives or their mothers or their parents to tell them, hey, so-and-so's in the hospital or so-and-so's dead. Never wanted to have to make that call or go into one of these houses that were littered with bullets and bomb fragments. No one in the houses got hurt. We're just blessed, absolutely blessed. And I just want to thank, again, every police officer who came that night. I wish I could have a beer with every single one of you. God bless you. Thank you. And please, everybody stay safe.
John, one of the things that I always like to say is that I don't frequently hang out with cops. I don't hang out a lot, period. But when I do go out, or I like to be around cops because it makes me feel safe for some reason. And why, do I think I'm going to get attacked by 7 terrorists? No, but I just feel because of that camaraderie and that spirit of what we've all been through, the common experience, that I feel very comfortable and I feel very safe being around other cops. And I don't know, Philly, do you feel the same way?
Oh, 100%. I'm the kind of police officer. It's in my blood, I say. And so when I'm around other cops, it does give me a sense of security. And I go into Brooklyn a couple of times a week. I go visit my cousins at their restaurant, and a lot of cops stop in there. And when it's late and it's dark or it's a shitty night or something like that, and I see a radio car pull up, it just gives me that extra little bit of feeling that, everything's good. If there's bad guys in the area, they're going to see the radio car and they're going to think twice about doing anything stupid over here. So
in fact, Phil, don't we call certain locations in Brooklyn, we say, is that a 1 or 2 clip location?
Yes. This place is not far from a 2-clip location.
And if it's really dangerous, it's a 2-clip location.
It's just outside of Coney Island, and it's very close to a housing project. So that's why I use that analogy. But yeah, you made a good point, Bill. Yeah, listen, the defund the police thing is a ridiculous notion. I mean, I've had, bad guys like Sammy the Bogravano say it's ridiculous. I mean, there's somebody that's a bad guy in his life, did a lot of bad things. And even he said, come on, you're crazy. You can't defund the police. So that's a good question right there.
There was a bumper sticker that was popular in San Francisco in the early 1970s that said, if someone steals your car, don't call a hippie, call a cop. You ever hear about that? I mean, that kind of sums it up. I mean, who are you going to call?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's crazy. Michelle, the question on the screen, and I know you'll probably hit this out of the park.
Yeah.
What do you think about Jahar's apology letter at his trial?
You know, it's interesting because so at the federal courthouse, the staff, the security are often retired cops. And, you know, think about it. These are the people who day in and day out have to see this punk smirking at the victims, you know, doodling on his pad. His lawyers were rubbing his back and he was kind of ignoring them. At one point, my good friend, Rebecca Gregory, who lost her leg and her son got badly injured, you know, she said, look at me, because she was given her victim impact statement and Jahar refused to look at her. When first we had the dead man walking nun who testified that he was a changed man, none of which there was any evidence for just by his demeanor alone in court. You know, he pissed off the former police commissioner, Willie Gross, so badly that Willie mumbled under his breath as he passed the defense table, "You maggot," which obviously what I think I wasn't sad about, you know, as you could see, because I could read his lips. But that apology letter was insincere because of his actions. And one of those security officers told me after he was found guilty and sentenced to death that all of his attorneys were weeping. So they drag him out in his shackles and he's in this little room afterwards with his attorneys and everyone's weeping but him. And I think that sums it up. Like they were weeping. Well, remember,
I know.
the first time Ruby Flock ever lost a case.
You know what? But Michelle, you know why they were weeping? Because the gravy train of his trial was over, and they weren't going to get paid $350 or $450 an hour, whatever attorneys get paid by the government. You know,
they were staying at the Intercontinental. What kind of government employee gets put up at the Intercontinental? So they were walking over to the courthouse for the Intercontinental, and you know, it's still a gravy train. There is still countless attorneys collecting a big fat blank check to defend this guy. So his apology letter, to answer the question, I don't think anyone was buying it because he didn't look actions, and I'm sure Clip is going to come up with a beautiful word of wisdom to sum up what I'm saying right now. But there are actions, and then there were words. And Jahar's actions throughout this entire debacle. I mean, even the fact that people continue to say he followed his brother. He had a secret Twitter account that was created long before the Boston Marathon. And on Patriots Day 2012, he tweeted this ominous threat from that secret jihadist account saying, wait until you see the marathon next year. And I'm misquoting it, but it was something that was threatening that he did an entire year before he unleashed that carnage on Boylston Street in our city, which, you know, Cliff described it very well. It was a horrible time, but just like 9/11, it showed us the best. It's the worst of an action that shows us what people are capable of, what the best people can bring us. And I think we saw that after 9/11.
Michelle,
that's
policing. Policing, you see the best of humanity and you see the absolute worst of humanity. And we lived that during our whole careers. And the good outweighs the bad. Thank God there's more good people than bad people.
You know what? It baffles me how good America was to these guys and how much they hated it in return.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's permeating, you know, the United States from what I can tell right now. The people who have the most to be grateful for hate America the most.
Yep.
I mean, you know what? This entire family never had a job. They were all on welfare from the time they arrived.
And
that
what
apartment
did
they
they
lived in
come
was paid
from?
for by Section 8.
And they came from a very, very rough situation.
It's amazing how you could be so have so much hatred towards, you know, like it's like biting the hand that feeds you. You know, it's just really amazing. And there's I don't want to mention the person's name, but there's people in Congress that was saved by this country, and now they hold a position and they actually hate the country. And I think everybody that knows anything about politics knows who I'm talking about.
I
but
definitely know who you're talking about.
It's definitely it's disgusting that they lied and cheated their way to a position, and they literally hate our country. So I don't know if it might be what Bill said earlier. It might be a religious thing. It's just a hatred I mean, look at the hatred that these two had for our country. Look at the hatred. I mean, he was running towards the gunfire, Tamerlan, and when he ran out of bullets, he threw the gun. I mean, that's something from a movie. It's like make believe, and he did it. So,
and John, I love the story of the 61-year-old sergeant that ran and tackled him. I mean, that's a damn. I think Belichick should be looking for him to give him a job.
Well, all right. Though I am no psychologist, I do believe that part of Tamerlan's hatred for the United States was his denial of being allowed to fight for the U.S. Olympic boxing team.
Yeah,
that probably was the hinge that turned him.
That could be.
I think that is what turned him. Cliff, you're right. Because look, if you read Mayhem, I think you can agree with this conclusion or not. But it's pretty apparent the conclusion is that somebody made Tamerlan Tsarnaev a promise, and that promise was, "You help us, we help you." He was incredibly motivated to become a citizen. He participated in a photo essay at BU called "Will Box for Passport." He was desperate to fight for the U.S. Olympic teams, and he was pretty good. He might have been able to actually do it, and then he got screwed over. And this was a case where somebody was supposed to hold his hand and make sure that everything went smoothly at USCIS. There were some very, very dangerous people taken off the planet with his help in Russia. So I think he was made a promise, and when he got screwed over and over again at USCIS, in his view, he got mad and he got even. And it was very embarrassing. In the Chechen faith, there's a saying, it is better to be a dog than the youngest son. And the fact that Dzokar was a U.S. citizen, which makes me sick, because he pledged allegiance to our country on September 11th, 2012 at the Boston Garden. That small fact is so revolting to me. But yeah, Dzokar was a citizen, which he should have been stripped of. I wish the prosecution went after treason charges, because then he wouldn't be collecting a check. He wouldn't be entitled to this exorbitant defense because he wouldn't be an American citizen. But because he took that oath, September 11th, 2012, think about that. And months later, he commits this atrocity against his country that he swore allegiance to. I think it would have also saved us a lot of aggravation if he had been stripped of his citizenship.
It's like they're sticking it right up our butts. And you would think, based on what you just said, that the government would learn from Osama bin Laden, that he basically turned on us when we pulled out of the fight that was going on in Afghanistan, and he declared war on us, and nobody took him seriously. And it sounds familiar, though. The story sounds.
Bill, it's interesting that you should say that, because if you look at the connections that Tamerlan's family has to the CIA, it's the same dude. It's Graham Fuller. Graham Fuller, who is the father-in-law of the Tsarnaev brothers' uncle. Graham Fuller was one of the guys who believed in arming Osama bin Laden to fight the Russians in the first place. And this ideology that he continued to espouse is how the entire family got into the U.S. He was the station chief in Ankara, Turkey, when they applied for and received asylum. So they got hooked up really fast and really well by the very guy who was behind arming Osama bin Laden and training him with our weapons.
Unbelievable.
I mean, I hope I'm not going too far off topic, but what I've noticed that is a very it's kind of a connecting link between a lot of terrorists, like Osama bin Laden, the Weather Underground, even the Tsarnaev brothers. They come from privilege.
Yeah.
Yep.
These are all.
That's very true.
People that never
That's
really.
a good
lacked
point.
It's a great point.
Yeah,
I mean, look at.
If you look
was
at
driving
the
around in a Mercedes. I mean, he always had money.
Mhm.
Either he was a well-paid informant or he had some other side business going on, just like his drug dealing little brother Dzokar.
He had a lot of time to work out.
If you look at the mayhem that took place across the United States after last summer with the riots, most of those people were trust fund babies or kids with money that went and caused all the mayhem. You know, like your book says, mayhem. And you know, how are they coming up with all these different weapons and masks and tear gas masks and bear spray? That shit costs money. Somebody was funding them, and maybe it was because they had they came from wealth and they were able to do these things and cause all that destruction and mayhem that went on for those that whole summer of 2019.
And I know guys, someone's going to come at me for saying this, but I'm going to say it. When you pay enough taxes, you're not going to go around preaching socialism.
You're 100% correct, Cliff. You know, that's so true.
Look at I used to love. And seeing Cliff, what the government's taking it's too heartbreaking.
Cliff, when I would meet all these young comics when I was doing stand-up comedy, the entitlement these little scummers had, you know, like, oh, I should get comprehensive health care. I go, why don't you get yourself a comprehensive job or join or join the damn Marine Corps and become a man, you little piece of shit. Right. You know what I mean?
I'm going to quote my buddy Sergeant MacLellan right now. He said to me the other day, these kids these kids were born on third base and walk around like they hit a triple.
Yeah. That's, you know, so you want to hear something? That's what someone said about the Cuomo brothers. They were both born on third.
They're lovely, those two.
They were both born on. I don't want to get into that. We already did a show on them. I just want to mention someone in the chat said, and I'll acknowledge it. Today is the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
That's right.
December 7th, 1941. So I just want to patriotically mention that. But you know, guys, we're at an hour and 16 minutes. So what I always do is I give everyone their last words, and when I say that doesn't mean go into a 10-minute a 10-minute speech, but you get like 30 seconds to 45 seconds. Michele, you're first. Last words.
I just have to. I'm very grateful to have people like all of you in my life. These are listen. This is when you start to believe in humanity. When you listen to the stories of NYPD detectives, and you know, I have the privilege of knowing John a little bit and the people that he associates with, and Cliff is a friend of mine now. I'm grateful to be surrounded by good people.
Thank you, Michele. Cliff, last words.
Last words. I owe a big debt of gratitude to my buddy and Sergeant John MacLellan, who I had the honor of portraying, as well as the rest of the Watertown PD and Boston area law enforcement. Curtis Bellafiore and Matt Kutcher, they played Officer Reynolds and Cologne. I'm going to speak for them. I think that they feel the same way. I had a great time tonight, guys. I'm just going to show my shirt. A friend of mine designed it.
Go ahead, man.
Great shirt.
I love it.
For my neighborhood. And January 14th, the Ray Donovan full-length feature film. Please keep an eye out for me. Bill, I love you. Michele, an absolute pleasure seeing you.
Cliff, it's always great to see you, man.
I've followed you for a very long time. John, I'm sure I'll talk to you later the week. Thank you for having me.
Sergeant John MacLellan, the star of this show, and a man that I was privileged to meet. Last words.
Sarge, thanks again for inviting me on. Detective, thanks again. Michele, nice to see you. Cliff, thanks. It was great being on with you guys. I can't wait till we can get together and actually sit together in a nice big steakhouse and have a big fat steak.
100%.
So, God bless you guys. It's on me. I'll bring the cash.
No way.
That's right. No, it's not on you. We should be paying for you.
Your money's no good.
I'm going to get the Tsarnaev brothers to pay for it.
You know, I wouldn't mind that letter of apology I could use for toilet paper. If I
exactly. Yeah. Phil Grimaldi, last words.
My last words are this. During my career, I met many, many famous people, actors. I shook hands with presidents. Since I'm doing the podcast, I've met a lot of other famous people, and I'm delighted. Every one of them, I really appreciate meeting them. But John, you hold a special place in my heart. You're a real hero. I thank you for coming on tonight. I really, really appreciate tonight's show. Cliff, I'm so glad that I got to meet you too. Bill spoke a lot about you. Michele, we have friends in common. And the best part of this book that you sent me, when you wrote in the front, you said, I love your outrage at injustice. With respect, Michele McPhee. And I really think that kind of sums it up. And thank you for coming on, guys. It was just a great episode tonight.
I actually like what Michelle wrote in mine. She said, "Bill, you are definitely the most handsome guy on Police Off the Cuff by far."
I think I said hot.
Anyway, my last words are, again, John MacLellan, it's been my honor and privilege to meet you. You are definitely law enforcement royalty, law enforcement gold. And all you folks out there that listened, thank you so much. We are so privileged to have so many great followers of Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. And guys, just have a wonderful night and be safe out there.
Stay safe, everyone.
Stay. Bye.
One episode just ain't enough.